We finally left the end zone. Just look at this beautiful scenery. It's marvelous, even though it's a bit different from what we had pictured. We were able to secure a few basic resources and are storing. I'm glad we prepared ourselves well for this kind of scenario, especially since our inventories in the end zone ran low. Don't forget, well done. Everything you need to know should be right here. I think the time has come for us to... Before we can construct buildings at all, we have to assign the profession builder to several settlers so that they can take care of construction contracts. In general, it's your responsibility to decide which... All right, your builders will be ready as soon as construction contracts have been issued. It's time to start focusing on our... The first thing we ought to do is to establish a working water supply. So we'll move on to our first construction contract. Place and build a jetty by a lake in the vicinity. Very good. The jetty was completed as planned. Now we have a place where we can collect water. We can obtain and store water from different sources, like a jetty, rain collector, or well in the cistern. The cistern should always be in close proximity to a water source, so that our water carriers Great. We have now installed a working water supply, and water is now transported from the jetty to our cistern. Consider hiring more water carriers if you don't have enough settlers available. You can never have. Now we should focus on food production. It's important to ensure the supply right from the start. A gatherer's cabin, a hunting lodge, or a fishing hut can directly remedy the situation. Good work. We've now taken care of our basic supply via food and water. Make sure that you have enough food and water on hand at all times, especially if you want to upgrade your settlement. A population that grows crops are another excellent way of getting food because they constantly grow as long as the soil is moist enough. Each seed has different yields and growing times. This means that it could take some time until your field is ready to be harvested, in contrast to looks good. Remember that we need the widest variety of food sources to stay healthy. You should also plan ahead for drought periods that might come when it's not going to rain. Stock up on food. At the beginning, we don't have much scrap wood or other resources. We could build a production building, but to obtain resources as fast as possible, it's best that we start gathering right away. Assign a Gather All Resources task. All the settlers who haven't been assigned any profession by you are going to accept these kinds of tasks. In addition, Since we now own plenty of resources, we can start to build a real production building. Then you don't have to always make efforts by hand that collecting is taking place. Production buildings are not only easier to manage, they are also distinctly more effective than simple tasks. Right on. The best thing for us to do now is to build a forester's lodge to automate our supply of wood and make it more effective at the same time. Foresters are not Good job. You might want to change this building's working area later on to tell your workers where they should get their wood from. And for your information, if you want, you can also tell your forester's lodge that they only ought to attend to reforesting an area in order to create a lush, green forest. Very good. Now we ought to take care of collecting scrap. Scrap is one of the most valuable resources because the quantities present are limited, and we can recover other resources from scrap. Unlike the task we just had, the scrap yard allows larger quantities of existing scrap to be great. You can change the working area for the scrapyard too. We can recycle scrap into 4 additional resources. Our people want a place to sleep and live. Cabins fulfill their need for safety and privacy and increase the confidence of their inhabitants. In other words, building cabins Besides cabins, you can also provide sturdy houses and shelters as housing. Sturdy houses withstand sandstorms better and have an increased storage capacity to boot. Children living in houses gradually fill up the house's stockpiles. Settlers do not reproduce in a shelter because they lack privacy. Let's return from our excursion into housing and refocus on scrap. With the help of a recycler or refinery, scrap can be sorted into 4 different resources. A recycler always takes scrap apart, one resource at a time. You can instruct your recycler to produce a different resource at a time. It's important that you focus on the resources you really need, at least in the beginning. Cloth and metal look like good options if you want to equip us with protective clothing and tools. Happy settlers are industrious settlers. That's why we ought to look after our people and protect them against the surroundings and dangers, like radiation. We categorize environmental radiation into 4 levels: no radiation, low level, medium level, and high level radiation. The radiation changes constantly and is influenced by weather and contaminated rain. Protective clothing helps to protect us against this kind of radiation, but it takes a while before it's produced. The tools we brought along from the Endzone are slowly but surely running out. So now, let's focus on manufacturing new tools. The tools will help us to work effectively. We'll need metal for that. With our lovely new tools, we are now prepared to work effectively. Should you ever run out of metal, keep in mind that you can also instruct your workshop to manufacture tools from scrap instead of metal. Though they won't be quite... Down in the Endzone, we had sufficient time and resources to educate ourselves properly. But our children don't have this luxury. We ought to build a school and pass on... Perfect. Besides the fact that educated children work more effectively, we'll also teach them to be more careful with their protective clothing and tools. This, in turn, leads to them staying intact longer, and we can serve... Now that our population is starting to grow, we ought to again turn our attention to the topic of food production. We are already accumulating fish and... Very good. As you can see, the gatherer's cabin is an effective possibility to get food quickly. But watch out. After a drought, it's going to take some time before the plants have regrown. As is the case with most buildings, here too, you can relocate the working area. Although we are sufficiently supplied at the moment, our survival depends on diligent planning. If we can lay out a plan for an orchard, then we can start to... The orchard has been laid out, and the trees are already beginning to grow. Similar to crops for farming, trees need some time until they are fully grown. But once they have grown, our gatherer's cabin gathers food from the surrounding forests. However, there are any number of other plants there which we can use as well. These plants can be gathered by an herbal hut. The herbs gathered there can be consumed. all done, we can equally utilize the gathered herbs to convert them into medicine later on. It might happen that an illness breaks out in our settlement. Radiation is the main reason why the health status of our settlement can decrease. Although our settlers already use protective clothing to shield themselves against environmental radiation, it might occur that our sources of water become contaminated. Great. We can use the charcoal in conjunction with a filtration system to purify our water. Unfortunately, our cistern... It would be a disgrace if we had to demolish our trusted cistern just to erect a water tower in its place. What we ought to do instead is upgrade the cistern itself. Our new water tower is up and ready for action. Good work. Filtering the water is an important next step because let's begin with filtering our water. To save on charcoal, we ought to ensure that at least a little bit of water not contaminated by radiation is being stored in our water tower. Water gained from a well Good work. We are continuously taking steps towards being better and better equipped to be able to survive in this hostile environment. Not only our water can become a hazard for our settlers due to radiation, our food can too. We ought to erect a decontamination. Very good. The Decontamination Post is going to supply all buildings that stockpile food and are located in it. It's true. We should never forget that even when we optimally prepare and protect ourselves, we're still going to lose friends and members of our family time and again. Okay, the cemetery will help us to quickly get a hold on ourselves and focus on the tasks that lie ahead. It's not a pleasant thought, but that's the way things are. At the very least, we can erect a number of buildings to increase confidence in our settlement, including, for example, a campfire or a pub. In this situation, however, our best option would probably be to upgrade our town center. Settlers can visit the new town. Very good. The new town center not only gives us more storage space, at the same time, it functions just like a campfire too. Settlers can visit the new town center, and by doing so, increase their confidence for a while. Our settlers can get sick from time to time. Settlers who have become infected with a disease can die from it if they're not treated. Settlers will go to a medical facility to have themselves treated and will be admitted there. With this step, we have ensured the survival of the settlement for a while. Very good work, since more and more children are... While cabins are a good way to get settlers to start a family, they only provide limited space. This can quickly lead to people having to live on the street. Allow me to suggest to you that cabins be provided only in a very targeted manner in order to control... Very good. Remember that when children grow up, they're going to leave their parents' house and look around for a new place to live. It might happen that they don't find any home at all. We ought to build a shelter to be able to provide... I've already pointed out to you that it could become very dangerous if we were to run out of food at some point. Since a lot of people are going to be living in the new shelter, we ought to provide them with access to food in their vicinity. The hunting lodge equally provides us directly with food, but it functions somewhat irregularly because it relies on wildlife in the surrounding area. Nevertheless, it can be indispensable during a drought because however, wild animals can not only be shot, they can be captured too. When a wild animal has been captured, it can be brought to a pasture and served there as livestock. Animals captured by a hunter are brought to a pasture where they are tended to and cared for by herders. Some animals produce resources such as milk or eggs. Other animals can only be slaughtered to eat. You must provide water for the animals you keep on your pasture. This enables them to survive and reproduce. When enough animals are fully grown, the herder will... Now your herders know how they ought to handle the animals. And now that you've already captured several animals, don't forget to instruct your hunters to hunt. With our increased production, our stockpile is going to run out soon. The supply routes for our production buildings are getting longer and longer too. To tackle these problems, Good. Temporary storerooms increase your settlement's general storage capacity. Place them in a targeted manner in order to shorten the routes for goods between your production buildings. To improve the whole thing even further, we can build a market to improve logistics at the settlement. Besides being an enormous stockpile for resources that is even able to store. Logisticians are able to amass resources from the whole settlement and bring them to the market. This improves the flow of your products and leads to your settlers having to walk shorter distances to fulfill their The larger your settlement gets, the farther some settlers have to travel to get to all of the food you produce. To make life a little easier for them, you can build a food station. Logisticians who With the new food station, your settlers are now able to supply themselves with food directly on site. If your settlement is supposed to grow even further, you can think distributing food at your settlement is going to prove to be extremely practical. However, your settlers not only need food to Now that your settlers also have a water point available, they can supply themselves with water and food. Similar to how it's done at the food stations, this enables you to Since we have our logistics under control, now we can concern ourselves with the weather and its challenges. We can build a weather station to enable us to make a forecast regarding upcoming weather and learn if potentially contaminated Very good. Now that we know what sort of weather awaits us and how we can protect ourselves against contaminated rain, rain not only humidifies the soil, it can also be automatically collected via rainwater collectors to generate a steady flow of additional water. Since we've never forget that our settlers might get sick if we distribute water contaminated with radiation in our settlement. Even if they're wearing protection, we can have our crops covered to shield our seedlings against radiation. But once they've been covered, naturally they won't be irrigated with rain anymore. To rectify this problem, we can build an irrigation plant. Fabulous. As long as our irrigation plant is supplied with filtered water, it is able to neutralize a possible contamination of the soil due to radiation. But watch out. When water contaminated with radiation, alongside contaminated rain, there are other environmental hazards, such as sandstorms or droughts. The soil dries out during a drought, and sandstorms sweep across the landscape from time to time. You can decide which type of task your builders ought to give priority to at our town center. You can instruct them to merely repair buildings, to erect new buildings, or to do both at the same time. This enables you to... Now that we've taken care of all the necessary needs of our settlement, such as food, water, protective clothing, and tools, our next efforts ought to focus on increasing the settlement's overall productivity. A research station allows us to develop different technologies. One step in moving our settlement ahead is to make very good. With this new research station and the ability to acquire electronics from scrap, we can provide our settlement with all the materials we need. Down in the Endzone, we dealt with the concept of a solar collector. This solar collector is able to collect sunlight and The solar collector produces energy by capturing sunlight and feeding this energy into a grid. The solar collector also... Each of your buildings automatically hook up to this power grid when you set up an electric power pole within the building's range. Buildings supplied with electricity work distinctly. Fantastic. I can only picture how our ancestors must have felt with their almost infinite supply of energy. However, you ought to... Logically, the solar collector is only able to produce energy during the daytime. It would be beneficial if we could also make electricity available at night so that our settlement That looks good. Some buildings are now connected to the power grid. Although a well-structured settlement that's hooked up to the power grid consumes a certain amount of... With the settlement producing on a stable scale, we can now focus on exploring our surroundings. Though we heard a bunch of stories in the Endzone, Well done. Assign settlers to be scouts and prepare expedition rations. When you want to send off an expedition, you can decide the quantity of expedition rations. Let's send out a few scouts to find a ruin. The scout will visit the ruin you have designated and explore it. As a result, our scout has returned and brought along a variety of useful information. Now that we know what we have to reckon with, we can put together. Each ruin has its own challenges, secrets, and valuable resources. Choose settlers who fulfill the necessary prerequisites for the respective ruin, and give them enough expedition rations to take along. In addition, now that you've commissioned the expedition, it's now in preparation stage. Expedition rations and other necessary resources are being amassed. Afterwards, the settlers you selected will relinquish their old tasks, assemble, equip themselves, and subsequent. Good news! Your expedition has finally reached its destination. Now it's all up to you. Contact.
We're here, Chief. There's not much to look at. Shattered glass here and there, rubble, and an old metal frame. Was that Scout pulling our leg? Sending us here all because of this junk heap? Then let's get to work.
Well done. Your decisions during an expedition are decisive for its success. Try to be as well prepared as possible and make wise decisions because the consequences could be fatal. Now let's look. Now that you know how you can help your settlers to manage in this environment so hostile to life, I'd like to show you how you can design your settlement in such a way so that your settlers are not only able to survive in it, they're actually glad to be here as well. Your settlers are eager to live in surroundings that please them. For instance, in this view, you see which cabins and shelters have been placed in attractive surroundings and which ones are in unattractive surroundings. If you want to make your settlers to increase the attractiveness of a residential area, you can put up some decorations to beautify your settlement. Each decoration increases the attractiveness. Your settlers are really going to like the newly built decorations. This way, you can even manage to design a residential area attractively that's located near industrial buildings. Although living in a pretty neighborhood isn't the only thing that interests your settlers, they want you to take care of their other needs as well. If you settlers' requests are collected for you at the Forum. However, the Forum is not only responsible for enabling your settlers to turn to you. At the Forum, you can address them too. You can issue decrees and establish rules at the Forum, stating how your settlers need to behave. Many of the decrees are extremely helpful toward enabling the survival of your settlement, though you should watch out that you don't demand too much of your settlers. Although such a thriving settlement like this one here not only has its advantages, it could be that the attention of prowling raiders is drawn to you, and you'll have to defend yourself against them. First of all, it's going to be important to set up your own defenses. An ammunition Very good. It's left up to you to decide whether you want to have your ammunition factory manufacture lethal or non-lethal ammunition. While lethal ammunition deals damage to the attacking rate, no matter what type of ammunition you want to have manufactured, one thing can't be missing. Your ammunition factory requires some sulfur for Very good, old friend. Now the production of ammunition can get going full steam ahead. To be able to give your settlement blanket protection against attackers, the next thing you want to do is to build several watchtowers and assign militia there. Your settlers will fire at raiders from these watchtowers. Very good. These watchtowers form the center of your defense. At each watchtower, you can As you can see, the raider force is now on its way here. Pay attention to the direction they're coming from. You might have enough time to adapt your...
You've said my people are hopeless cases. We were once. I took in one and all. Together we are strong.
It looks as if they were the last raiders, and the settlement's still standing. Well, it did get a few scratches here and there, but nothing we couldn't recover from.
You think you're something better. You deserve what's happening here.
However, in many cases, the raiders won't be paying you a visit just like that, without any advance warning and a reason. Most of the time, they'll demand tribute from you beforehand. If you can pay this tribute, they'll leave you in peace. Very good. By doing so, you bought us a little time to be able to prepare ourselves further. I think the time has come at last for me to bow out as mentor. I've taught you everything I know, and you've proven yourself by keeping us healthy and in good spirits. I may have taken care of heading our last days in the Endzone, but now all my faith lies...